"You're too stupid to even see what's coming." He said it like it was a compliment, like he'd done me a favor by teaching me how to lose. The man who said it, Marco Varela, had a way of folding arrogance into charm. He wore an Armani suit to our first meeting, even though he showed up in a battered Subaru, and he carried provenance letters that smelled like old paper and $12 million houses. He told me his cousin was a curator in Madrid. His uncle had been an auctioneer in Milan, and every time he slid another framed miracle across my gallery counter, I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. The night it all fell apart, I was standing in the gallery with a glass of rosé, and out of nowhere, the live stream that usually pings with 1,000 micro-donations lit up with the kind of message that makes your stomach drop. "He's a curator at the Smithsonian." Then the phone vibrated. One of my buyers had texted. "Warren just announced it on his Instagram Live. He said the painting I bought from you is a fake." I remember thinking, "Warren? Dr. Ethan Warren? Smithsonian? That can't be right." But he was right. The man who'd walked into my gallery 2 months earlier in an off-white sweater, who had asked about the signature under the varnish, and then smiled like someone pleased by a private joke, had been Dr. Ethan Warren, Senior Curator of American Art at the Smithsonian. He'd bought a painting I'd bought from Marco, a moonlight seascape we'd listed for $45,000. And he'd been using it as bait. He'd shown it at a small symposium on authentication, pulled back the cover like a magician, and then said on camera, "This piece is a forgery." He uploaded the footage. The world watched. My phone exploded. "You're going to take this personally," someone texted. "You should. Have you ever had your whole life turned into someone else's evidence?" But I had no idea what I was about to discover. Part 1, The Deception. Before Marco, the gallery was keeping enough of the lights on to pay rent and to keep my assistant Jules employed. We were a neighborhood place in Seattle with a few regular collectors, a little online following, and a stack of unpaid invoices. My wife had left 2 years earlier. We'd split everything, and I'd kept the gallery because it was the only thing that wasn't all countdown and pens. Then Marco showed up with a portfolio and a line that never failed. "Estate sale, small Midwest collection, needs love, not limelight." He sold me 3 paintings the first month. 2 were solid, small landscapes, naive figures. The third, the moonlight seascape, was the miracle. He said the painter had been dismissed in the 50s and rediscovered in an attic in Connecticut. He gave me a provenance packet the size of a Bible. He offered it to me for $9,000. I sold it for $45,000 to a regular named Claire, who proudly posted a photo of it in her Bellevue living room the day it was delivered. When Dr. Warren streamed the reveal, he said, calm and precise, "This is not by the hand of the artist in question. The canvas is modern. The pigments contain a synthetic not used until 1974. This provenance, look, there are too many clean transfers, shell companies, and a missing estate executor." He laid out the chain of custody like a surgical incision. Claire messaged me, "You sold me a fake." I remember his words as if they were a slap. That's Art Market 101. There's always someone making a living off stories. But I hadn't been paying attention. I had been hungry. "You sold this to me," Claire texted. "You lied." Jules found the DMs. "Marco said he had a private courier," Jules said. "He said the man paid in cash." What happened next feels like a slow collapse. A couple of collectors pulled their upcoming purchases. Someone anonymous filed a complaint with the state attorney general. My Ring doorbell footage, the one we had at the gallery because someone had tried to steal a turned frame once, showed Marco leaving the gallery late at night. A flatbed truck idling, but the angle was grainy and the license plate blurred. How do you explain to your landlord that your credibility isn't just how much rent you can pay, but the town's trust? How do you explain to the artist who consigned a small watercolor that your name is on a video where a Smithsonian curator calls you out by city and title? The comments on the live stream were unforgiving. Shady gallery. Buyer beware. People who had come into the gallery to buy mugs were suddenly investigators in gloves. But I had no idea what I was about to discover next. Part 2. The Discovery. You won't believe what I found next, I told Jules. And he rolled his eyes like a brother. We started digging. I mean full-on, obsessive, do not eat until you know where he lives digging. I pulled every email, every Venmo, every receipt. I dug into the provenance packet. It was gorgeous. Stamped letters, a typed statement that someone with a fountain pen had signed on an old Salvatore paper. But old paper can be faked. Signatures can be traced. The problem was, I didn't know how deep Marco's ring ran. The real break came when I hired a freelance investigator, Lena Cho, who used to work collections for a museum out east. Lena pulled a database record, a small, obscure art shipping registry from a company in Tacoma. The registry had an entry for our moonlight seascape, but the shipper's phone number traced back to a VoIP line. A VoIP line traces back to a lot of things, but not to a person. Lena then discovered 47 deleted messages on Marco's phone backup. Messages he thought he'd wiped. It was the first unmistakable proof. Drop at 34th, no paperwork. Client thinks original, keep it that way. Executor checks out, we move in 3. 47 deleted messages. I sat in my office and felt my hands go cold. It wasn't just about the painting. It was about a system. Shell companies, fake executor names, forged death certificates, and a network that sold rediscovered pieces to galleries like mine because they knew smaller dealers didn't have the legal budget to fight. There were more shocks. Marco had sold to at least 16 small galleries in the past 24 months. He had claimed a piece from an $847 million estate sale in Connecticut once. And the story had made its way into a lifestyle magazine with a full-page photo. That number, 847 million, was printed on a praise page like a seal of authenticity. It was a lie, a figure designed to give the paintings the right aura. 2 years of lies, Lena said, and she wasn't being dramatic. I called Dr. Warren. He answered on his first ring. I had notes from a colleague 3 months back, he said. We've been following pieces from a handful of networks for over a year. One of them hit your space. We were trying to trace the supply chain, but it's messy. You told everyone, I said. You said it live. His voice softened. Public exposure is ugly, but it freezes assets. It gives us leverage to subpoena records. You should have had proof before you sold it. But that doesn't excuse the harm. I'm not trying to ruin you. Were you angry when your nemesis turned out to be trying to help? Would you believe him? But there was also a different kind of betrayal. Public exposure didn't automatically mean justice. It meant collectors suing and headlines asking about Seattle's shady art scene. My phone calls to conservative lawyers returned voicemail. We specialize in estates, not fraud on that scale. The bank put a freeze on my account. Jules refused to come in for 2 days. For a while, it looked like I wasn't just the victim. I was complicit. We found shell corporations with names like Kestrel Holdings LLC and Garrick Trust. They'd accepted funds through PayPal and then laundered them via small commercial vendors. Money trails stopped at a Belize account. The con artist ecosystem was legal smokescreens and lawyers who never met their clients. The more we uncovered, the more the picture spread like mold. You have to be surgical, Lena said. You can't charge in. If you go public with partial proof, he buries you with countersuits. You mean just sit there and watch galleries get conned? I asked. Not sit. Build the case. Trap him. Part 3. The Preparation. My lawyer, Margaret Chen. Yes, Margaret Chen, who'd been recommended by a friend who'd once had a tiny libel scare, had been practicing fraud litigation for 30 years. She listened to the 47 messages and smiled for the first time since I'd met her. This is the most sophisticated asset protection I've seen in 30 years, she said. But it's messy, and messy is good. Messy leaves prints. She marshaled resources. A forensic accountant named Rob, Lena's contacts at a lab who could test pigments with mass spectrometry, and an old contact at the Washington State AG's office who agreed to take a look if we could prove a pattern. We started to build a paper trail that would force Marco to either run or come to court. The idea was not to play by his rules. It was to make his rules explode. I can get him on perjury if we can show forged provenance, Margaret told me. And if we can tie transfers to his shell companies, we can get asset freezes. But you need patience. We needed patience, but patience was an enemy when my phone buzzed daily with collectors demanding refunds. Margins shrank. The landlord started whispering. 3 times it looked like our plan would fail. First near failure, the lab that was due to test the pigments delayed because the machine broke. For 10 days, nothing happened. Every day the lawyers on the internet commented like vultures. Second near failure, a witness, one of Marco's couriers, called and then messaged. I don't want to get involved. He wouldn't take our offer of immunity. We thought he'd flipped. He vanished. Third near failure. Margaret told me the AG might not have the bandwidth if Marco was linked to offshore accounts. It could be years of chasing, and meanwhile, the gallery could die. People hate waiting, she warned. But then 3 things saved us. Lena found a shipping manifest in a dumpster behind Kestrel Holdings' rented office. A physical scrap someone had thrown away with Marco's handwriting. The courier who'd vanished left a last-minute Instagram story about being in Tacoma with a van. We used that to triangulate pathing with Ring doorbell footage and a GPS trail from a rental truck that Marco had carelessly used twice. And most crucially, Dr. Warren sent a quiet message. I can testify. I have a network at the Smithsonian's legal team. We can stall the public backlash long enough to build the case. Laura, the courier, finally answered a secure DM after weeks of silence. I can meet, but in public. Cameras. She agreed to a courthouse conciliation room meeting, and she brought receipts. You're taking a huge risk, she said in the lobby, her voice trembling. I thought it was just flipping paintings. I didn't know he'd be this deep. We filmed it. We recorded her receipts. We connected payment records to Kestrel Holdings. We had Rob trace $120,000 into an account that paid for Marco's sister's house, an Aspen vacation, and 2 Tesla payments that kept popping in and out. By Christmas, I'll be sipping champagne in Tuscany with your money. I remember that line. Marco had written it, texted it, in one of the 47 messages recovered. He wrote that to one of his inner circle. Would you believe me if I told you this was the point where revenge stopped being emotional and became a calculation? Part 4. The Confrontation. The courtroom was cold and smelled like aged leather and strong coffee. I sat next to Margaret, my fingers worrying a paper cup. Opposite us was Marco, clean-shaven and too calm, as if he'd only been at a dress rehearsal. He smiled at me like a man who planned the theater. Mr. Varela, Margaret said, we have evidence of forged provenance, shell companies used to process funds and bank transfers linked to your immediate family. Marco's smile thinned. You have allegations, he said. You have a man who buys modern canvases and then calls them old. People buy stories. I sold stories, yes, but stories have value. Did you know the estate executor you used was fabricated? Margaret asked. She slid a folder across. The judge flipped through it. Photocopies, stamped receipts, Lena's photographs. The 47 deleted messages printed and bound. Marco's face shifted. Those are circumstantial, he said. 2 of your couriers have testified, Rob, the forensic accountant, added. We have payment records. That's not proof of intent, Marco replied. Intent is in text messages, Lena said. Here's a message from your number to courier number 3. Keep it clean. No papers. They can't know. Marco's voice rose. You framed a narrative. You're making me the villain because it's convenient. You're the one who texted, He'll never figure it out. He's completely clueless, Jules read from his phone in the gallery of the courtroom. He had driven down from Seattle to sit behind me. You're the one who said, "You're too stupid to even see what's coming." Marco's face went white. The whole gallery murmured. I felt my chest unclench. But the best moment was when Dr. Ethan Warren stood. He'd agreed to testify. "When I bought the Seascape," he said, "I did so to trace a supply chain. I did not anticipate the public fallout would be concentrated on a dealer rather than the network we were targeting. I own that. But the evidence shows this was organized. The pigment analysis shows modern synthetic indigo. The offered provenance names a deceased executor whose signature doesn't match known samples. This is not a dispute about taste. This is fraud." The judge finally looked up. "Mr. Varela, according to our disclosures, including what your counsel has produced, your immediate liquid assets are minimal. We have evidence of transfers amounting to $120,000 in the last year to entities associated with you. We are prepared to issue a temporary asset freeze." Marco tried to interject. "That's not fair. Silence," the judge said. "Mr. Varela, do you realize you are under oath?" There was a pause long enough to hear the hum of the courthouse air. But then came the final blow. Margaret stood and said softly, "Your Honor, we have a bank ledger showing a transfer to Santini Investments with the memo, 'Gift for Family.' Santini Investments has no business registration locally. We have, however, a wire trail leading to an account in Belize which corresponded to a recent purchase of a property in Tuscany titled to Marco Varela's sister, Anna Varela. We request the court order an immediate forfeiture of funds pending investigation and allow Dr. Warren to hold the painting for conservation and evidentiary purposes." The judge nodded. He looked at Marco like you look at someone who'd been warm in your house and betrayed you. "I'll grant a temporary freeze and appoint a receiver to manage the assets," he said. There was a sound I won't forget, Marco's breath leaving in a little rush. He looked as if his oxygen had been taken away. "You've lied to a court," the prosecutor said later. "Perjury is a felony. By Christmas, I'll be sipping champagne in Tuscany with your money," Marco had said in a message. The room hummed with that irony. Would you have enjoyed that moment of hearing a liar's plans used against him? I did. I admit it. But justice is never purely poetic. Marco hired a high-powered defense. He tried to countersue collectors. He smeared me on social media, posting a doctored image of a check with my gallery's name and an accusation that I was laundering money. Friends left comments hesitantly. I slept poorly. I felt guilty for the collectors who had been hurt, and for the artists who lost faith in me. Yet the court had new tools. The Smithsonian's legal team worked behind the scenes. Dr. Warren's quiet pressure opened channels with federal investigators. An extradition warrant was discussed for workshop leaders who'd used his name as cover. For once, the scales moved. Part 5, The Aftermath. 6 months later, the papers announced a plea deal. Marco's lawyer negotiated a sentence, restitution payments, and, more importantly, a public registry rollback. He was ordered to pay back a portion of the transfers, turn over assets including the Tuscan property, and cooperate with ongoing investigations. He got 2 years and a fine. Not enough for some, but it was justice the way our system sometimes gives it. Imperfect, procedural, and complete enough to change people's lives. The gallery survived. It was a slow rise, like repairing a dented hood. Some collectors didn't come back. Others whispered and returned with cautious eyes. Warren invited me to consult on an exhibit, not to brag, but to make sure the Smithsonian's acquisitions had voices from the small dealers who could be victims. He and I had long conversations that felt less like apologies and more like alliances. "You were a vehicle they used," he said once. "That doesn't make you guilty." A small feature ran about us in a local magazine. I made peace with the fact that people loved the drama more than the lesson. But we began to insist on stronger provenance, and the community began to circle its wagons. Jules stayed. Lena took a permanent job doing compliance audits for museums. Margaret sent me a card the week the receivership was confirmed that said, "Justice is rarely pretty. It is sometimes necessary." As for Marco, headlines followed his movement to a minimum security facility. I saw him once in a custody photo, looking like the same man with the Armani suit, only now the suit was thrift store. His sister moved out of Tuscany. His LinkedIn cleared. He had tried to make art from lies. The system had made its own art out of consequences. Our lives changed in ways both small and enormous. I learned to ask more questions. Who provided this piece? Can I see the executor's paperwork? Is there a living relative who can confirm? I installed a better evidence system, encrypted messaging with buyers, verified invoices, and a gallery insurance policy that would hold up if the world tilted again. Here's a truth that's ugly and real. I made mistakes. I wanted the miracle painting to transform my gallery overnight. I ignored red flags. I let charm and narrative into professional decisions. Would you have done the same with a $9,000 painting and an $847 million story attached? Be honest, we all like good stories. Would you have sued or tried to out the con artist publicly? Would you have rebuilt quietly? Tell me in the comments. Questions, pauses, and final thoughts. Have you ever been in business with someone you later found out was lying? What did you do? Would you call the curator who embarrassed you a hero or a villain? Some people think Dr. Warren should have handled it quietly. Others say public exposure was the only way to stop the network. Was I wrong to be furious at first? But then I realized something. Revenge is not the same as justice. I wanted him ruined in a primal way. I wanted his name burned. What I got was better in the long run: institutional response, asset forfeiture, and the slow rebuilding of a community. Little did he know that exposing him would force a lot of people to clean their houses, literally and figuratively. What happened next changed me. I started running a series of workshops called Provenance 101, free to small dealers, modest fee to bigger houses. I hired an art historian part-time. I put a clause in our consignment agreements about chain of custody verification. I started a group chat with 3 other dealers where we share red flags and suspicious consignments. We're now the community that used to be a scattering of individuals. Would you have forgiven him if he showed remorse? I honestly don't know. Some people think I'm cold because I didn't accept Marco's plea for leniency when he wrote that he was sorry. But apologies after profit are cheap. I prefer accountability. There are still nights when my phone lights up and I think it's a new collector. Sometimes it's just a spam text. Sometimes it's a real person asking to buy a small landscape because it speaks to them. Those are the best messages to get. Was I right to go after Marco the way we did? Did we overstep by going public with everything we found? Tell me I'm not crazy for what I did next. Because I put my savings into a scholarship fund for young curators who can't afford specialized training in authentication. I wanted to turn something ugly into a preventive. 3 shocking little facts you should remember, not to scare you, but to teach you. 47 deleted messages from Marco's phone recovery were the smoking gun. $120,000 in transfers traced to an account that funded property purchases and lavish travel. 2 years of lies were enough to nearly put my gallery out of business. Anyone who's been through the grind of small business survival knows this. Reputations are fragile. Trust is the currency. You can lose it faster than you can print a receipt. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have trusted your dealer's story? Would you have called the Smithsonian? Would you have raked the con artist over the coals publicly? Tell me in the comments. Was I wrong? Did I overreach? Some people will say I went too far. Others will say I didn't go far enough. Either way, the gallery is open, and I'm more careful. The city trusts us a little more, and the Smithsonian and our local dealers have a new line of communication. If you want more stories where justice gets messy but ultimately lands, subscribe and hit the bell. I've got dozens of cases like this. Forgeries, insider thefts, tiny dealers standing up to offshore rings. And if you've ever been conned or you helped catch a con artist, I want to hear your story. Drop it below. We learn from each other. One last thing. When the judge handed down the temporary freeze and the press asked me to speak, I said, art should uplift. When it becomes a vehicle for theft, we all lose. The only thing worse than losing money is losing trust. Heard enough drama? Maybe. But if there's one lesson I can leave you with, check the provenance, keep your receipts. And when someone tells you a story too perfect to be true, listen to your gut. It's not polite, it's